In this world, there are stories so old that their very first telling has been lost to time. Stories like the story of Cinderella or the story of Snow White. But one story that has managed to survive, not just for hundreds of years but for thousands, is the story of the Lost Library of Alexandria. And now I'll tell you that story. Once upon a time in the ancient city of Alexandria, which was built by Alexander the Great, but then taken over by his equally great friend Ptolemy, who then became the Pharaoh of Egypt, there existed the greatest library the world had ever seen. It contained books from every single civilization that existed at that time, and it was free for anyone to read. That is, as long as they didn't break them. Unfortunately, people did break some books. So eventually, Ptolemy created a position whose sole responsibility was to prevent people from breaking books, and he hired Demetrius of Phalerum for this job. One day, someone came up to Demetrius and asked him why he was spending all day sitting in front of the library instead of actually doing something. To make Demetrius look busy, he told the man to go find him a book on the subject of dreams. The man looked confused and said, "How am I supposed to do that? That's like asking the universe to explain itself." Then Demetrius explained how the universe would try to explain itself if he wrote a book about the topic, but that since no such book existed yet, the universe wouldn't have any way of explaining itself, and so it would be impossible for him to find such a book. "Then," said the man, "I suppose I should just break a book and write my own." And with that, he ran off to go find some paper and papyrus. Demetrius knew exactly what the man was trying to do, so he quickly got up and followed after him. Eventually, the man came across a room where stacks of papyrus were being stored. He picked one out, dipped his finger in ink, and began writing. When Demetrius entered the room, the man stopped writing and tried to hide the papyrus behind his back. But Demetrius simply took it from him and read, "When you dream, your soul takes flight and visits other worlds. There it can experience new sensations and learn many things. Some dreams are good and helpful while others are bad and dangerous." The man looked ashamed and confessed, "This is everything I could come up with. I don't know anything about dreams. I was only pretending to write a book so I could destroy it." He then explained his plan to Demetrius, who listened patiently. When the man finished, he simply shook his head and said, "You truly are a fool if you think that the universe would allow itself to be explained in such a simple book." Then he handed the papyrus back to the man and told him to take it to the scribes to have it copied. "What?" the man exclaimed. "Are you sure?" "But I was only pretending. The book isn't even true." "It doesn't matter if it's true or not," Demetrius replied. "The point is that someone started writing about the subject. Who knows? Maybe one day someone will write a better book about dreams than this one." The man looked confused. "But what am I supposed to do with this copy?" Demetrius smiled and said, "Go find another book that contradicts this one and bring it to me." The man nodded and ran off to do as he was told. Now, I don't know if you've ever gone to a library before, but I can tell you that finding a book that contradicts another one can be pretty hard. You usually have to read both books first to figure out where they contradict each other, and then you have to search for the exact part where they contradict each other. This can take a really long time. So luckily, there was an easier way to do it. All the man had to do was go to the main hall of the library and yell, "Does anyone here know a book that contradicts this one?" The librarians would hear him and yell back, "Yes, it's called that other book." And the man would run off to go find that book. The first librarian he asked was Callimachus, who led the research department of the library. He yelled back, "There's a book called On the Invisibility of Dreams by Aristarchus." After finding and reading that book, the man went back to Callimachus and asked him for another book. "Have you read the book on the subject of love?" the man asked. "Oh yes," Callimachus replied. "I've read it many times. It's a beautiful story." "Well then, could you please tell me what happens in the end?" the man asked. Callimachus frowned. "That's easy. The hero dies tragically, but his deeds live on through the ages." Said the man. "So the hero dies, but does he die in his dream?" "Of course not," Callimachus said. "Why would he die in his dream?" The man thought for a moment. "Well, in the book on dreams it says that when you die in your dream, your soul wakes up. So if the hero dies in his dream, then his soul wakes up, which means he never dies at all. Callimachus looked at him disapprovingly and said, "Don't be ridiculous. A dream cannot possibly be more real than life itself." But a dream can feel more real than life," the man argued. "If you're dreaming about being chased by a lion, doesn't the dream feel more real than life?" Callimachus considered this for a moment, then said, "Dreams are nothing but the mind playing tricks while we sleep. They have no power over us when we're awake." "Really?" the man said with a smile. "Because in my dream last night, I found a secret passageway that led me to a treasure chest filled with gold coins. So I woke up and decided to dig in that spot in my backyard. And lo and behold, there was a treasure chest filled with gold coins." Callimachus looked shocked. "Was it really a treasure chest filled with gold coins?" "Of course not," the man said with a wink. "It was a clay pot filled with cow bones." After hearing this, Callimachus knew he had been defeated. But he still tried to save face by saying, "Even if your dream did lead you to that treasure, it doesn't mean that it was real. It was probably just a coincidence." "Maybe," the man said with a shrug. "But what are the odds that a coincidence would happen twice?" And with that, Callimachus had been defeated. He slumped down in his chair and said, "Very well, you've won. What do you want me to say?" "I want you to say that dreams are real," the man replied. "Okay," Callimachus said. "Dreams are real." The man then ran off to find Demetrius, who was sitting in his chair just as he had left him. He told Demetrius about his conversation with Callimachus, who had apparently written a book about the subject of dreams. Demetrius nodded and said, "Good. Take this book to the scribes to have it copied." Then the man went off to find another book to argue with, and Demetrius sat back down in his chair. However, the more he thought about the conversation he'd had with the man, the more he realized that he had made a mistake. How could he have let that man ruin the library? Demetrius got up from his chair and went to look for the man. He found him in the main hall arguing with another librarian about whether or not dreams were real. Demetrius walked up to the man and said, "Listen, I need you to do something for me." The man looked at him and said, "Anything for you, Demetrius. Go back to that other librarian and tell him that I'd like to talk to him about dreams." "Sure," the man said, "but he's already convinced that dreams aren't real." "That's okay," Demetrius said with a smile, "because I'm going to convince him otherwise." And that's the end of the story. Now, some people might think that this story is about dreams, but it's really not. It's about libraries. If you like this story, then you should definitely check out my podcast where I explore forgotten tales from around the world. New episodes come out every Wednesday. And if you like this story, then you should definitely leave a review on Apple Podcasts because reviews help other people find the podcast. Anyway, thanks for listening, and have a good night.